right? And everybody realizes, oh, that's terrible. Murder is, how many of us murder on a regular basis? No, of course not. And we all recognize that these are terrible things. And then God throws in thievery. I mean, how many of us steal pencils from the boss? Because he's got plenty. Well, that's thievery. And it's included in this list that God hates. And he says, none of these people that do such thing will enter the kingdom of God. And you're going, well, I need to rethink my life. I need to brush up. Because God is real serious about stuff. And when you read these kind of passages, you kind of go, boy, I need to brush up. Because I think I take God's word a little too lightly sometimes. Great job. I just won an award for what I'm not sure. Put it over here. It's pretty, isn't it? It has George Washington up there or something. I know you are all just can't wait to hear the finality of my Jerusalem, Babylon thing that I've been teaching on. But something happened a couple of weeks ago that I kind of had this dissertation with God, this conversation. And so he wanted me to talk on this this morning. And what that is why do bad things happen? And how should we respond to bad things when they do happen? Now, I'm not going to wax, and I have in the past, so I won't do this today. I'm not going to wax into the direction of the philosophical question of why do bad things happen to good people. I'm not going to go in that direction. What I want to do is I want to talk about the spiritual perspective, the biblical perspective, what we see in the Bible when bad, terrible, traumatic things happened to biblical characters. What did God do? What did the people do? What was God's expectation? What did God applaud in their response, and what did God not like? That's kind of the direction I want to go. Okay. So, let me start with my little story. As some of you know, well, let me digress. Some of you think that I'm like stoic, and you're probably correct. See? But that doesn't mean, however, that I am completely emotionless. I do have emotion and I have feelings, but I tend to not wear them on my lapel. I tend to kind of put them aside because why? For me, they get in my way of making good judgment. So because of that, people perceive me as being stoic, and to some degree I need to apologize for that because I think emotions are a good thing when they're controlled and they're not the driving force behind the decision-making process. So with that in mind, we used to own a kitten, and I use the word kitten because that's what I called the cat. It was kind of an endearment, so I called it the kitten. We never named it except the kitten. And we've had it for like 10 years. And so if you've ever been around our house, you quickly realize that I'm kind of weird. Because for my relationship with the cat was very unique. I speak for the cat. The cat spoke. And when we used to have a dog, the dog spoke. And the conversation between the dog and the cat was sometimes very tense and traumatic. But anyway, because of course they didn't like each other. Dogs and cats, they generally don't. So anyway, I would speak for the cat and of course Max when he was around. And so many times the cat or the dog would say things that I wouldn't want to say. right? I mean, if I want to say it, I'll just say it. But they would say things that I wouldn't have enough guts to say to my wife, and so they were really kind of brash, these pets. You wonder why they haven't even kept them. But nonetheless, they developed in my mind personality. And so this little kitten was very, very affectionate. And it was always wanted to be where you were. If it was asleep somewhere and I was watching some lecture in another room, it would find me out. It would find where I was, and it would come lay next to me. And that was its 24/7 basic routine. So anyway, I think it's like 3 weeks ago. Friday evening, Joey was out of town, and so I was home alone, and I opened up the front door because it's getting dark, because the cat's not allowed to be out, although you wouldn't want to hear what it said when I required it to come in. So it was right there right in the middle of our front sidewalk, and it didn't want to come in. And usually you can't chase this thing down. Once it's out, it kind of laughs at you, right? You get close, about 3 feet, and then you'll scurry, and it doesn't work. Very rarely can you actually catch it. It has to come in. So I'm about ready to go to bed. It's like 10:30 or something. So the general routine is, if it decides to stay out in the evening, all you have to do is open up the window by the bed, and within 15 minutes, it will jump in. And then it'll curl up. When Jody's gone, I allow it to sleep on the bed with me. So it would curl up, and sure enough, that night I went to bed, opened up the window, jumps in, and curls up next to my feet. Now, it's interesting that I'm sitting there at the front door going, come on, kitten, come on, trying to get it to come in. 9 times out of 10 it would. But this night, it didn't. And all of a sudden, I kind of felt like God was saying, this is the last time you're going to see your kitten. I'm going, what? So you just kind of blow stuff like that off, right? I do, because I want to see the cat again, right? So anyway, I opened up the window. I went to bed, opened up the window. Sure enough, within 15 minutes, it jumps in, curls up next to my feet. I go, okay. I reach up, close the window a little bit so it can't get back out, right? Well, sometime later that night, probably like 2 or 3, it decides that it's going to go back out. Well, and I'm kind of half asleep. I know that it's right by my feet. Now, mindful, I haven't seen it since the front door thing, right? It jumps on the window ledge, and somehow, I mean, this cat, because we have those lever door handles, it went through doors like hot knife goes through butter. Nothing could prevent it from getting in the door that you would close behind you. Same with windows. If it only needed to move it like an inch or so, it could get its little paw and pull the window and open. That's what it did that night. It opened up the window just enough so it could squeeze out. And so I hear it thump on the ground outside, and then I'm kind of awake. And within and I don't want to, for all you pet lovers, of which I'm one, traumatize you too much because I got traumatized a little bit. So I won't get into great detail, but within about 5 seconds of the kitten jumping out the window, I hear this giant cat fight. But within like a second or two, I realized it's not a cat fight. It's an owl. And I know that it's an owl because the cat fight is getting further and further away. So I'm sitting there going, I'm like really ready to go to sleep now. Not. And I'm laying there going, it's bad enough to lose your pet. We can all relate to that. But I'm going, God, why did I have to hear it? I don't need to have that memory cycling through my brain 24/7. Because it's not a very, when you have a relationship with some animal, it's not a very fun thing to hear its last sound. So anyway, I asked God, why do these kind of bad things have to happen? It wasn't like, it was only 10 years old. It was great shape, good health. It wasn't like limping around on its last leg or anything. So I'm going, it's time to go, ain't it? So why did this happen? And that's when God said, I want you to talk about this, because he revealed to me that there's three-ish, with maybe a fourth reasons that came to my mind why bad things happen. And so that's what I want to talk about today, is why do bad things happen and how do we respond? Some of these bad things that happen are just timing. We live in a cyclical world. And, like for example, when my mom passed away, nobody sinned. And God goes, okay, I'm taking her out. Right? Except maybe Adam and Eve. We all live under the curse. But there wasn't like some evil sin that was going on and God goes, okay, I'm done with this. Or I was busy, I wasn't watching what was going on and your mom died. No. It's just cyclical things that happen. And on a lighter note, like, okay, your vacation's over. And now you're sad and you're bummed out. And you're going, God, why does it have to end? Well, it's cyclical. Things just come to an end. Or like for all you younger people in school, why does college or high school have to be this traumatic? Why do I have to go through all this test? I remember when I was in college, the last year, I remember driving home. I went to school in Humboldt. And driving home, I lived in Southern California. Driving home, I was a little, which may not seem surprising to you, I was a little bit out of it. Driving home, I wasn't like thinking straight. Because I was one of these knuckleheads that would take way more units than you needed to. I would take like 28 when 17 and a half was a full-time student. Okay, so during the last couple of weeks, I would literally tear myself apart trying to prepare for all these tests. So I'm driving home, I'm done. Graduated, driving home, and I know I need to be really careful because I'm not 100% here. Why do these things happen? Well, those kind of examples are just cyclical. How many of you can think of cyclical things that have happened in your life? I'm not talking about accidents. Like God doesn't care about this and they're just things that happen randomly. That does not happen. Everything happens for a reason. I do not subscribe to, God doesn't care about that, so this happened and it's not involving God. No, everything involves God. If you care about it, he cares about it, even if he doesn't care about it. If you care about it, he loves us so much that and that's the way us husbands need to be. How many of us care about everything our wives care about? But we need to care about them, right? Because they're important to her. God's the same way. So sometimes these things are just cyclical. And what do you need to do when you recognize, this is just a cyclical thing? There isn't a reason other than it's a cyclical event in our life. What do we need to do in our relationship with God and our well-being? Because sometimes they can be traumatic. But how do we process these kinds of events, these cyclical things that bring stress and sometimes trauma into our lives, but they're just cyclical, no one really sinned? Well, God will tell you, but there's specific reasons why these kinds of things happen. Can anybody think of reasons why these kinds of things happen? Well, things like my main thing that God was always teaching me, evidently I didn't learn the first time, was patience. Right? He always was saying, the reason why you're going through this is because I want you to learn patience. Right? Wait on me. I want you to live my timeline rather than my timeline. Right?
I find that sometimes we get a little off track, and God has to bring us back on track a little better.
Exactly. That's very good. Sometimes he wants us to learn patience. Sometimes he wants us to develop kindness. Sometimes he wants us to stop. He allows these kind of things so we learn to control our emotions. Like what I was talking about earlier, control our emotions and be driven by our mind. Instead of our emotions should be there, but only as a cheerleader for what we know and we've fixed in our mind to do and accomplish for his will. This, what you were saying, Sharon, when I was in college, when I first started, I remember having this conversation with God. I was going, God, I don't have enough time. I like to, then as well as now, study the Bible as a teenager. And I realized I didn't have enough time to spend the time that I dedicated to that and to do these 27 crazy units that I was trying to swallow. There was lots of demand on me. So I remember God saying, you shall not pass if you don't commit this many hours to study. No, he didn't say that. He said, look, John, all of this is me. I was studying biology. He said, you study me in the Bible, study me in the natural world. It was a natural science area that I was into. And he said, yes, you still need to study the Bible, but for a time, I need to have you prioritize your time differently. And so he said, it's okay to not prioritize the Bible like you had been, and prioritize your studies. And then when you're all done, we can shift back. And it was real comforting to me to hear God say that it was okay to reprioritize. And sometimes these kind of events require a reprioritization in our life. Okay, for a time, maybe we need to downsize and a little less investment here and increase our investment over here. So sometimes God allows events into our life simply because they're cyclical, but there's always a reason why God allows these kinds of things to happen. And we need to ask God. Don't just go, oh, God's troubling me again. Go, God, why? What is the lesson here to be learned? Is there patience that I need? That was my thing, like I said. Or maybe there's other issues that God is trying to mature in us and bring us into, in this case, bring me into adulthood. So, the second reason is, we've all heard of Job, right? He wrote a book in the Bible. It's the earliest, if you don't count the Toledot for Genesis, it's probably the earliest written book. It was probably written around 2000, 1900 BC. Let's get to Job 1 here. Job was a righteous man before the Lord, the text says. And basically what happened in the story, it says that, Job's minding his own business, worshiping God, he's a righteous man, and Satan appears. And he comes before God in heaven, and he says, God starts the whole thing off. Hey, have you seen Job? Kind of like Job's a standout. God's proud of him. Which brings to mind, how many of us do you think God's proud of you? God's proud of me? I think we need to ask that question sometimes to ourselves. And what makes God proud of us? Don't all yell out at once. Our obedience, yeah, right. Our behavior, what we think and what we do. God goes, whoa. Yeah, our actions. I'm proud of that person over there. Job 1:1 says, there was a man in the land of Uz, which is in Saudi Arabia today, north end, but near the where the Persian Gulf ends, on the west side, whose name was Job. And that man was blameless, upright, fearing God, and turning away from evil. Wow. And then it goes on from there. Now let me jump down to 6. I'm going to read 6 through 12. Now there was a day when the sons of God, there's only a few times in the Bible, this is one of them, where the sons of God says, where the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. Here the sons of God, it's a euphemism in Hebrew that means angels. We see the same thing in Genesis 6, where it says, and the sons of God lusted after the women of men and produced offspring, and they were called Nephilim. Remember that passage? It's the same phrase. It's sons of God, and when you see that, it is a reference to angelic beings. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, from roaming about the earth and walking around on it. The Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? For there is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing God and turning away from evil. Then Satan answered the Lord, has Job feared God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge about him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. Then the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hand, in your power. Only do not put forth your hand on him. In other words, that you can't take his life. So Satan departed from the presence of the Lord. It's interesting, God called him blessed because he was a righteous man. God blessed him, and because of that, he increased in all of his possessions. Notice it says that whenever I read this passage, I think of this. It says that you have put a hedge around Job, so I can't get in there and mess with him, cause bad things to happen. And I always think of this. There was a Christian comedian who says, we always pray, put a hedge around Fred, in our prayers, and he was going on, hedge? You think a bunch of shrubbery is going to stop Satan? Why not pray for a ring of tanks or something? Or maybe, in the Lord of the Rings, remember that giant metal wall? Why not put that thing, or pray for that? But a hedge of shrubbery, it's kind of funny anyway. I always think of that joke that this Christian comedian said. This word hedge is suk. It's shin vav kaf, and it means a fence of protection. So a hedge is fine. But God does put hedges around us, doesn't he? Remember, it's in 2 Kings chapter 6. Remember that passage where Elijah is being confronted by the king of Aram, which is Syria, which lay to the north, and he was being confronted and attacked by this king, and Elijah was just cool. No problem, not worried. And his servant's going, what's wrong with you? They're going to kill us. And so what did Elijah do? He prayed to God that his servant would see what he saw. And what did he see? A huge ring of angels round about the mountains around him. There was no reason for Elijah or the servant, once you saw that, of course, to be worried, because there was far more of them, those angelic protectors, than there was in the army of King of Aram. So God does put rings of protection about us, but it seems that God can choose to go, okay, I'm going to remove the hedge. Right? And what then happens? In this case, Satan barrels through the little gap and causes havoc. He causes trauma. He causes bad things to happen to our life. In Job 2:5, Satan's still having a conversation with God up in heaven. Satan answered the Lord and said, starting in 4, Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, yes, all that a man has he will give for his life. However, put forth your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh. He will curse you to your face. What Satan was trying to get from Job was him to curse God. So I looked up, we've been studying the word curse here because we've seen it in, God cursed the snake in Genesis 3, and he cursed the ground. Remember those curse words? And then he lifted the curse. He said, I will never curse the ground again in Genesis, whatever it was, 9 or 10. After the flood, he's not going to curse the ground again. All different kind of words for curse. This is even a different word for curse. In fact, this is the word barak, which usually means bless. It means to kneel down, right? In literal language, it's to kneel down as in bless, like you would bless the king. You don't boldly stand in front of the king and you kneel down showing respect to bless. But this word can mean to curse, which I found kind of interesting. And in this sense, it's not the curse where you put a hex, like Satan would put a hex on you. It's the kind of curse which is interesting that it's interpreted curse, and it literally means curse. It's the kind of curse, and I'm wondering if sometimes we might not do this. But the meaning is to wish ill will, or to say impious words against God. Impious, it means impugn his nature. So, do we ever do that? Do we ever, when we get mad, stuff happens, do we impugn God's nature? Now, like, what are God's what would include attributes that you would say are God's natural characteristics? What would they include? Love, compassion, grace and mercy, patience. Yeah, I don't know why that keeps coming up, but he's very patient, and thank goodness for that. How many have needed God's patience in our life to work through an area of weakness? Yeah, both of my hands go up on that one. Anything else? God's supreme power and authority, God's attentiveness to us. Now, sometimes we impugn God's nature by accusing him of being too busy with the Chinese. There's a lot of them, right? And so he just was like, or here's the typical one. You don't care. You don't care about me. You don't love me. Well, aren't we really impugning his nature when we say that? Those are natural attributes of God. We have natural attributes. They're not quite the same list that God's natural attributes are, right? But that's what we're aiming for, right? Because to be holy is to take on the attributes of God. So what Satan wanted was, he wasn't hoping that Job would curse God. What he was hoping is that in his emotional response to this, he went through hell. He lost his entire family. His wife said he should just curse God and die. He lost all of his sheep, goats, all of his wealth, and he's destitute, and he's got boils all over, and he's scraping them with a shell or a rock or something. Doesn't sound like Disney World to me. And what did he finally go, man, I am believing in something, and I've been worshiping something that doesn't care about, he had a really good reason, multiple reasons to default to that emotional response. You don't care about me. If you did, I wouldn't be sitting here in the dust, scraping the boils off and all of my wealth removed, and my family gets killed. And he had a lot of reasons to finally impugn God. You don't care about me. You don't love me. But did he ever do that? No. This guy's awesome. How many of us do you think we would win that test? On a good day, probably not. For me. Yeah.
When his wife told Job to curse God, was she using the same word as what Satan was meaning?
Say the beginning again. I missed it.
When his wife told Job, curse God, was she using the same word there as what Satan used?
Excellent question. Somebody find the verse, and I'll look it up real quick. But I'll keep moving. So why do you suppose God allows, is somebody looking this up for me? Good. Oh, do you know it? Okay. Why do you suppose God allows these kinds of Job events in our life? Because we've probably all had a Job event. Satan has come and gone to God and said, I don't like you. I don't like that guy or that gal. And I want to mess with them because I know you've built a hedge of protection, a ring of tanks around them, and I can't get through.
The short answer, yes. Same word.
Same word?
Resh Kaf, rock.
That Resh Kaf? Yeah, same word. Interesting. The wife was being very accurate. Absolutely. In fact, if we turn to Deuteronomy 13, this is a very specific situation about a false prophet that's coming to the Israelites, and here's what God, but there's other places, didn't look them all up, where God says basically the same thing. It says, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for the Lord your God is testing you to find out if you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. By the way, parenthetically, this love your God with all your heart, soul, and mind is a euphemism in Hebrew. It means love the Lord with all that you are, all of your being. So you don't sit there and go, okay, how do I love the Lord with my mind? It's love the Lord with all of your being, all of your strength. That's what it means. So what's going on here? What seems to be being implied here is this prophet, false prophet, is being allowed to come to God's people, i.e. you and me, and whisper sweet nothings that will tickle our ears and sound really good to have us fall away from God. And why is God allowing such things? Because he wants to test our what? What does it say? He wants to test our love. Right? Now, what does this word love mean anyway? Love is, I should follow my notes here, but love is an interesting word in Hebrew. It's not a warm, fuzzy feeling. Like, oh, I love flowers. Which I actually do. My father was a florist, so I have a fondness for flowers. See, I'm not as stoic as you once thought. But is that all that love is? The love of something? I mean, we say we love our spouse or our children or not our boss, but, well, maybe. But is it fond feelings that God is? I want you to have fond feelings for everybody, your neighbor especially. Is that what he's saying? Is that what love is in the Bible? No. No. Love always carries with it the idea of service. We love on people. Then in English, that translates a little better because we all know what love on somebody means. It means we care about their feelings as much as we do ours. We care about their needs and we're serving them. What did God call Job in that first passage? Yeah, he is. Have you seen my servant Job? Is there a question? Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say, in these moments of testing too, for me, it's pretty awesome when you can recognize that this is happening. When you can look at the Job event in your life and go, oh, I know what's going on here. I'm being tested, and then you can, talk to God about this and say, okay, God, I'm choosing you no matter what, and I'm wise to what's going on here, and it's just, to me, it strengthens my faith so much when I can have that moment with God and go, I choose you.
And that decision is not made emotionally alone. It's made mentally with your mind, and then you can get excited about it because your emotions jump on board and you get excited about God. Go ahead, Jim. Don't stay off into something else.
One of the things about the word testing, or God tests us, I've always found that a kind of a challenge or a difficult thing. But if you look at it from the standpoint of, say, you are doing working out, like some people do 3 times a week, and you actually throw yourself at something, and you're conditioning yourself. You're going through, you're actually testing your ability, but what comes up at the end is you're strengthening yourself. And so what God is doing when you read, he's testing you, he's actually putting you through he's putting you through something, a rigor to strengthen you in him.
I love that concept. There's always a purpose. Anything that God allows into our life that we would identify as something bad or trouble or something you ought not to go through, there's always a purpose that God has. And sometimes, like we said earlier, it's just to strengthen us or give us patience or reprioritize our life. Or in this case, there's many reasons why Job's love for God, his service to God was tested. Sometimes we just need, when you go through difficult times, many times in my life, what I've noticed was before I entered into this, something uniquely miraculous occurred. And that should be a warning sign. Because then the trouble starts. And if you didn't have that miraculous, unique event to start the whole thing off, you would quit. You would go, these circumstances here are not what I had in mind, and certainly God wouldn't allow these circumstances if God was God. How many have had that kind? But because the whole thing started off with this miracle, that you quickly and readily realized that it was God that started the whole thing off. And so you went with all zealousness into this endeavor, and it nuclear bombs on you. And you go, boy, I sure made the wrong choice there. No. Sometimes it's God's will to have the nuclear bomb go off in a matter. Why? He loves to put us through hell. No. Like Jim was saying, he loves to test us. But by going through these troubles, our metal becomes stronger. And the worst response that we can have by Job kind of challenges is to get mad at God. And I've told you my story about getting mad at God and how I decided I was never going to get mad at God again, although I came close with the kitten, I have to admit. But I didn't. But it popped into my mind. But up until that point, I haven't gotten mad at God for years. Because there's nothing to it. There's no benefit at getting mad. If you realize who God is, the creator of the universe that has power over everything, you're going to get mad at him? When he has in his word, he says, praise God in everything because all things work together for good, and yet keep reading, for those who love the Lord. That's the key element there. So if you love the Lord, now remember what's love, not a warm fuzzy feeling. If you continue to serve God through hell, these hellacious events, God goes, all this is going to work together for good. Because I'm the master and commander of the universe, and I'm allowing this for a reason, purposely, personally for you. Well, that's inspiring, isn't it? In the midst of this, it's like, okay, I might be able to last another 5 minutes. I'll give you 5 more minutes, God. Yes.
James 1:2-4 says, regard it all as joy, my brothers, when you face various kinds of temptation. For you know that the testing of your trust produces perseverance. But let perseverance do its complete work, so that you may be complete and whole, lacking nothing.
Thank you so much. I was looking for that, and I couldn't find the address. That's an absolute excellent verse in this context.
John 14:15 says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. So I don't know how Job knew that, because Sinai hadn't happened yet. He must have had a relationship with God or something.
So, moving along. Yes, Gary? Oh, I'm sorry. Over here, Ann.
Yeah, I wanted to say that Scripture also says that as we grow in maturity from faith to faith, it's God who transforms us into the image of His Son, who learned obedience through suffering. And we are His fellow heirs, so why should we not expect to go through the same thing?
We're fellow heirs. It's an interesting concept, isn't it? We're in his family. And it's not like dad and mom on earth, even though some of us have had great parents. You're talking about the universal Father. You're in his family. So, my kids maybe had reason to doubt my motives when they went through trouble. But are we going to make the step and apply us earthly fathers and our natures to the nature of God, the Father? That's a reach, isn't it? We need to always keep in mind that the Creator, that he says is our Father, loves us and has the best for us, even though he allows sometimes Job against us. So, the third reason, when we sin. Now, some people don't like that we actually cause trouble to enter into our life when we sin. How many like that concept? Oh, I don't like it. I want to skate free, right? Blow it, no trouble. No consequences. How many wish that was the way that it was? And so thinking back at Job, there was obviously a covering that he had, a ring of tanks around him, right? I remember, I might have told this story recently, but I'll tell it again. I remember back in the 20s, when I was a young guy in church. I went to church and there was a missionary there, and he was an older person. He had to have been, because he told a story about a witch that was invited to come to America sometime in the 20s. And this is like 50 years earlier, okay? For those, actually 40 years. 30 to 40 years later. And the witch came, and he was asked to curse certain things in the States, i.e. its foundational roots, which was, in those days, very clearly, we were called a Christian nation, right? A Bible-believing nation. And he was asked to curse that. Look, the way the missionary told the story was, is the witch came in the town, and he tried to curse America, and he had no influence. He had no power, because he said that there was like a covering over this nation that protected it against such things, against such spiritual kinds of attacks. Oh, really? There was a covering over America? I think so. Remember his curses and his blessings at the end of Deuteronomy? It says, if you do this, I will bless you. Remember the story of Balaam? Remember that story? Can I get his name off the top of my head? Balak, thank you. The king of, I don't know, some guys, it's now southern Jordan. The Moabites. He asked Balaam to come and curse Israel. And he did, and he cursed Israel, right? I won't tell the whole story, but what happened? Because Balaam was frustrated in his efforts to curse Israel. Why? For once in their life, Israel was being obedient. This is just before they went into the land. They were being obedient, and God said, I have put a blessing on them. Now, under what circumstance does God say that he will put a blessing over a people? When we choose rightly and live a holy life. God puts a ring of tanks around us and says to Satan, don't touch him. Could Balaam touch him? No. He was, in fact, the only thing he was given was a blessing to give Israel. Remember? Interesting story. So, does the opposite happen? Do we ever find where God, other than Job, do we ever find, like, when we sin, God goes, okay, I'm going to lower the covering of protect Jerry.
That's awesome you got that. That was kind of where I was going. In Romans chapter 5, it says, not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given us. You see, at just the right time while we were still powerless, Christ died for us.
Yeah.
But God demonstrates his own love for us in this while we were still sinners, Christ died for us.
See,
For
God develops the service. What does it say there?
it says, but God demonstrates
Demonstrated.
his
He
own love.
demonstrated his love by serving us. And the one thing that will serve us best is to remove our sin, and that's what he did here.
Yeah. And for if while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him. For if while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his Son, how much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved through his life?
So we're supposed to serve our enemies, the people we don't like, we're supposed to serve them, / love them. Yeah, Yeshua did, right? So, I'm running out of time. I've got 15, 20 minutes here. Let me try to finish this. So does God ever remove the ring of tanks around us? Does God ever do that? Let me tell you a story. When I was in college, I went up there, it was like in 72 or 3. Went up to Humboldt, and a wonderful place. You know, I'm a naturalist kind of guy. My degree was in biology and zoology, but not into the medical direction, but into the naturalistic world. So I took all these fun classes that, you know, you just gotta love, like fisheries and range management, waterfowl management, all these kind of things. I took some hardcore biological basic kind of classes as well, but I didn't go there for that. I went there for all these unique classes that Humboldt alone in the nation offered at that time. I was having such a great time, and keep in mind, you know, I had great parents, and they taught me well, and so I went to church every Sunday. Back in those days, it was Sunday, but when I first got there, I was overwhelmed with the you know, it's in the middle of the redwoods, and the Mad River is right up there, and there's other rivers that have salmon going up, and they're calling to me. The salmon are calling to me on my day off, which happens to be Sunday, right? And they're saying, come and catch me if you can. So for the first few months, I didn't go to church. And I just kind of, I remember we were walking, I forget the name of the river. It's the river that comes out of Shasta Lake, whatever the name of that river. And I remember I'm walking along this cliff edge, and the river's down there, and it's a little ledge, and it's all this shale rock on my side. I'm kind of walking like this with my fishing pole over here, and I slip, and my hand slips down like that. Well, I call it my suicide mark, but it's not suicide. Everybody knows is like this, right? But this is like this. It's perpendicular. It's parallel with my arm, right? I'm pleased. If I didn't try to commit suicide. And I can still see it today. It's a scar that was left. And let me tell you, this thing bled like you can't believe. I didn't hit the main artery that goes through here, but I hit something big because it was like, I looked like a bloody mess. I looked like I should have been dying. My buddies that were with me hauled me back to the car. We're like, an hour's drive from the hospital in Arcata, right? So we get there, by then it stopped bleeding for the most part, but blood was everywhere. And I'm going, gosh, God, why did I didn't even need to ask. The dumb question, why did this happen? It happened on Sunday morning when I should have been at church, right? And God put up with it and put up with it and put up with it. Finally said, okay. This is getting old. You're not doing what you need to do. You need to reconnect. If you're going to make it through college, you need to keep your priorities straight. And that's me first. It can't be the salmon first, even though they're calling. So, did God lower or remove his little sphere of protection around me? I mean, I was living a blessed life until I started listening to the salmon. And God removed it, and for it, it wasn't a big deal, but it took a bunch of stitches, and it made me think. Always think when bad things happen. Why did this happen? God will tell you. Sometimes it's just cyclical. Sometimes it's a Job thing. Sometimes it's because we're doing the wrong things in our life. Our behavior is found wanting. Does this ever occur in the Bible? Yes, it does. I'll give you one of a Gentile. Remember Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon? Remember God gives him this vision of this statue, and it's made out of different metals, the head of which is made out of gold. And who is the head? Nebuchadnezzar, right? And so in the ensuing next couple of chapters, what happens? You can tell this went right to his head, right? He's the king of kings by being the head of gold. And so what does he do? In the ensuing record of history that Daniel wrote down, he builds a statue out of gold. Tall. I think it's like 100 feet tall. And he has everybody bow down and worship to it. Now, do you think that he was thinking about God? No. He was thinking about himself. In fact, the proof in the pudding is the next chapter. What next happens? God's confronting him about his pride. And finally, God has enough with it. And the text says that it's 7 years, right? 7 years, God is going to remove your soul and give you the soul of an animal. And it goes on. And so because of his disobedience, he fell the same way Satan fell. Pride. He was wallowing in pride, which is very corrupting. You can't have that with the king. And God put him through this trouble because of his own sin. But let's take an example of a believer, David. I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to. I'll give you the passage. It's Samuel 24:10 through 13. Isn't it interesting? I think I should read it. Change my mind. It's the way I am. Oh, yeah, that's what I want. Let's see. It's 2 Samuel 24:10. 2 Samuel 24:10. Dave, I'll give you the short context. David decides to count the people. God didn't like it. We won't get into why, but David realizes that he blew it. He made a big mistake. It says, now David's heart was troubled after he had numbered the people. So David said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly in what I have done. But now, O Lord, please take away the iniquity of your servant, for I have acted very foolishly. When David arose in the morning, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Gad, David's seer or prophet, saying, go and speak to David. Thus the Lord said, I am offering you 3 choices. Choose for yourself one of them, which I will do to you. So Gad came to David, and he told him, and said to him, shall 7 years of famine come to you and your land? Or shall you flee 3 months from before your enemies while they pursue you? Or shall there be 3 days of pestilence in your land? Now consider and see what answer I shall return to him who sent me. But this is kind of profound. What is this implying? Your and my behavior can influence and cause trouble on others. Now that's a little bit scary. I mean, it's okay if I bring it on myself, but if Fred brings it on me, whoever Fred is, I'm not, if there's any Freds here, don't be insulted. I'm just using the Fred out there, Fred. So Fred's behavior can impact my life? I don't like that. How many of us like that? We're being good, towing the line, Fred screws up, and I get it. What? Well, what does that imply? We all have authority, don't we? Sometimes, if we're young, the only thing we have authority over is our own person, ourselves, right? And you make a mistake, the only thing that's going to be impacted is you. But as you grow up and mature through some of these other troubles occurring in your life, God goes, oh, you've been good with a little bit of authority. I'm going to give you more authority. Always beware when God's handing out authority, right? You want it, but you want to realize that the opposite of authority starts with an R, responsibility. Thank you. So think about your own life. Maybe you're married, maybe you're not, maybe you have friends, maybe you have a job. Think about maybe your ministry. God's given you the authority to be involved in this ministry. What that means is that if you've been put into authority, you now can impact some innocent bystanders because of your behavior. These people I think he chooses the 3-day version, right? This pestilence that comes over the people for 3 days. Did the people sin? No, David sinned. Well, think about it. Now you're covered with something, boils or some pestilence, and it's not your fault. It's your king's fault. Kind of makes you stop and think for a while, because we're all in authority, aren't we? And many of us are in authority that puts a ring of pink around a few other people, or maybe a lot of other people, right? And so our behavior can knock a few tanks out of the ring. That's a little scary. We have to realize that there's responsibility that needs to be considered when we behave the way we do, right? Yeah, let's go ahead.
So for every action there is a reaction, and the consequences of our sin is what punishes us.
Is what you say?
The consequences of our sin is what punishes us.
Right, and God is a mean ogre, so he's just looking to bring trouble and punish. No, remember, when God brings trouble, punishment, what is he after? He's bringing trouble into our lives because he wants to catch our attention, so we modify our behavior and toe the line, right? It's interesting, the word authority in Hebrew is rabah. It means to be many. When you have authority, you're in charge of more than just yourself. you're in charge of or you have authority over, but you also have responsibility over. David had responsibility for the entire nation. When he messed up, the entire nation caught it. Now think about you and your life. I have no time left, and the best part of what I'm going to say is left. Let me see. So I have in my notes here that I just want to say this. If you have physical authority, you own a business or any kind of authority that we've already talked about, guess what you also have? Even if God didn't initiate it, you did it on your own. Somebody say it over here. You also have spiritual authority. Right? If you have physical authority in the here and now, you have spiritual authority. So you can bless or curse others by your own behavior. So we need to walk carefully before the Lord, right? When we have authority. Yeah.
I just wanted to say one more thing before everything is over. That another reason sometimes bad things happen is because we live in a fallen world. And one thing I'd like to encourage some of the ladies in the room, I had a miscarriage between babies. And I was praying about that. And a word that God gave me was, because I was really into gardening at the time, you know, preparing for the end of the world. And he told me, in this world, not every seed can grow. And it has nothing to do with, you know, my sin or, you know, we also just live in a fallen world. So I thought that might encourage some ladies that have gone through this.
There's, which is on the next page of my notes, the last page, if you're all going. I want to cover more thoroughly than just briefly scattergun this final point because it should be developed better than just a scattergun approach that I could try to do in a couple of minutes. But there's all kinds of things that fall into categories that don't easily fit into these three, such as what you bring up. It's not because of sin. It's not because of all these other reasons. It's not even cyclical, and it might in part be a Job thing, but that doesn't really make it feel very good when you see people that have gone through, you know, like certain like rape or you know, some of our veterans suffer from PTSD. You know, those kinds of traumatic events. It doesn't really satisfy very well to talk about these three things. Next week, I'll develop this a little better. And certainly your situation. We also lost a child. I forget which one it was. I think it was, I don't remember. But, you know, you ask God, you know, who sinned? You know, and, you know, in the New Testament, what was the answer? You know, they asked God that, you know, this person was, what? The man born blind, and what did Yeshua tell the people that asked this question? He was a bum. No. It was that God would be glorified. And so, remember that even though we can't wrap our brains around why questions sometimes, like why did that happen? God has everything under control, doesn't he? And maybe he wanted to bring people into the kingdom of God by having this trouble befall on you. And it's going to happen much more likely if we are attentive to the purposes of God rather than our purposes, because nobody wants to go through that. losing a child. Nobody wants to go through these traumatic, veteran-esque events and have them just be haunted by the sights and sounds of their history. Nobody wants that. And we'll talk a little bit next week about how to deal with some of that. But it's helpful for me to put it in the context that God has everything under control, and your trouble may be drawing somebody else closer to God. It's all worth it then, isn't it? Amen? Let's all rise for the Aaronic blessing. Father, we come before you. We just love and adore you. We thank you for the trouble. I have a very difficult time praying this, but I'll pray it anyway. For the trouble that you send on us. Father, I pray that we learn to process it better and well and more fruitfully in the future. And I pray that you give us special insight into the trouble that does come, so we can look like sons and daughters of a Father that only intends for goodness in our life in the end. Anyway. Father, we love and adore you. We thank you for you caring so much